This is Right On Radio, the voice of the true right.
Welcome to Right On Radio. My name is Daniel Friberg.
And I'm John Morgan.
And I'm Jonas de Geer.
And today we are having a very special podcast because we don't actually have any guests. So instead we're going to focus on ourselves and give our listeners a little bit of a better understanding of who we are. And well, we'll have some spontaneous discussions and talk a little bit about our own backgrounds and so forth. So I hope that you will appreciate it. So to begin with, maybe you could start a little bit, Jonas, telling us how you kind of got into this right-wing way of thinking and your kind of awakening to traditionalism and nationalism and conservatism and so forth.
Well, it's always a long process, you know, and it's difficult to sort of pinpoint that at that moment. That was the moment of my awakening. I can say, though, that it sort of grew gradually on me in the 90s. I saw, even in the 80s, since I grew up in Stockholm, the Swedish capital, I did see and experienced the problems with, I was about to say mass immigration, but I mean, there was no mass immigration then compared to what it has been the last couple of years, of course, but it was bad enough already at the time. So you would have sort of immigrant gangs roaming the streets and et cetera, et cetera. So and also the whole political correctness that started flourishing, which was an import from American universities. When I went to university in the early mid-90s, that's another thing that sort of struck me as that disgusted me, to be blunt. And I don't know. I if I could pinpoint one moment, it would be Elisabeth Olsson's display of this Ecce Homo thing, if you remember, Daniel.
Yeah, that was quite disgusting.
Yeah, in the cathedral of Uppsala, it was shown on a big screen, and this is. To explain to the listeners, this is a display of our Lord in homosexualized situations, and this was
and she's basically like a cultural Marxist lesbian sort of artist, isn't she?
Yeah. No, she is lesbian. She's openly lesbian and yeah.
And then everyone is still waiting for her Ecce Mohammed display.
It's not going to happen. So no, but I mean,
what is that?
No, it was a joke. I mean, obviously, it's fair play to. I mean, it's a fair game to attack Christianity for all of these cultural Marxists, but they are none of them dare to criticize Islam, even in the most moderate way.
Of course. Yes.
But to portray Jesus Christ in like in a homosexual context, which he did in a quite disgusting way, that's perfectly fine. It gets funding from the state and everything, but she would never ever do even mention one moderately critical comment about Islam, which is
she would,
quite
and let alone Judaism, but. Because
it's kind of part of the cultural Marxist narrative that attack everything that is European and leave everything else alone. It's not about attacking religion really, because in that case, I mean, Judaism and Islam would be fair game as well, but it's attacking the pillars of European civilization, basically.
I think that they do actually have a deep hatred of religion as well, but they they focus on Christianity because it's European, although I think that the only reason that they ignore Islam and Judaism and so forth is only because, they recognize that it's useful as a wrecking ball against Europe.
Well, yeah, their main motivation is their hatred of white civilization and white men in particular, of course. I think religion comes in like second or third place. Or correct me if I'm wrong there, Jonas.
Yeah, I wouldn't know, but I mean, I do think we have to be sort of honest here that sort of Judaism is the big exception to the rule. I mean, you've got the Spencers and the Gellers and this whole sort of counter-jihadism thing. So it's and you've had the what was his name? The guy with the dog installation. Help me out here, Daniel.
The guy with the dog installation.
Yeah, is Lars Vilks, is it? Or?
Yeah. Lars Vilks.
Yeah,
but he's kind of an outcast. He has to have like 24 hours surveillance and protection because there are so many Islamists.
Yeah, sure, but he's not. He wasn't thrown in jail and etc. So it's not completely politically incorrect in all quarters to criticize Islam, and one can draw whatever conclusions from that one wants to.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm just saying that Christianity is fair game.
Absolutely.
And Islam is, well, it's more legitimate to criticize Islam than Judaism, of course. I mean, Judaism is completely off the table, but even criticizing Islam is kind of stigmatized and considered xenophobic in Sweden. And whenever you do that, if you want to do that in the public discourse, you have to differentiate between the moderate Muslims, which of course constitutes the majority, and the Islamists. You have to use the word Islamist when you criticize Islam, basically, and play into this PC narrative, which is very silly, actually. That there is a very small minority of extremists, but the vast majority are really nice people who just want to live the Western lifestyle and be happy, and they are just the same as we are, and so forth, which is very silly because even the moderate Muslims support ISIS to some extent, and
Yeah. Anyhow, I think this was back in '97, and then that's when I decided to become an intellectual activist, if you will. Not a political activist already at the time, but to work for what I believed in and to fight this cultural decay. So that's it, and I was lucky I could start my own magazine together with a colleague, which had quite an impact at the time, I dare say, and I hope it left a bit of a legacy. And then they put pressure on its financial patron, and it was discontinued. And after a couple of years, I felt that I realized that I needed to move abroad because Sweden can be very difficult to live in if you're a political dissident. So I moved to first England and after 1 year up to a Scottish island. And
can I ask you, Jonas, how did you decide on that, where you were going to move?
That was actually a coincidence. I was offered a job as a teacher at the school in southern England of the SSPX. Mm-hmm. So I worked there for 1 year. That was pretty dysfunctional at the time. It's much better now, I hear. But I resigned, and I also felt I wanted to get back into writing and do that full time. I haven't written as much as I would have wished since then, but I've done other things as well. I mean, I've done a weekly podcast called Motgift, which means antidote in English, and now I'm doing this. And I've also got a small publishing house called Reconquista Press, which is dedicated to traditional Catholic and nationalist books. So and preferably the combination of the two. But yeah, no, I had been up to Orkney before, and I didn't like southern in England. To be honest, it's too crowded. It's not a great place, I felt, to raise kids. So we moved up to a small island. Daniel has been.
Yeah, I've been there, and it's a very nice and pleasant island, I have to say. It's a small island. I guess you have around 300, 400 inhabitants, and it's a very safe and nice and European environment, with some kind of Nordic influences, and it's a very nice place, especially for raising a family. It's like the perfect place.
I think it has been, and there was a traditional Catholic monastery here. There still is, even though they've sort of changed direction in some senses, but that's another matter. But you had access to the sacraments, which for us as a young traditional Catholic family was important. And just a combination of that led me up here. So enough about me.
Yeah, enough about you, Jonas. Well, actually, no. I would like to add that the magazine you started, I mean, I think you're kind of downplaying your importance here. It was a huge success in Sweden, and it made a huge impact on many Swedes, including myself, actually. I was greatly inspired by your magazine, because this was at the time when shortly after I kind of shut down my own short-lived magazine, and I was looking for kind of intellectual alternatives, and your magazine, Samtidsmagasinet Salt, as it was called in Swedish, was a very huge inspiration for me. I mean,
that's nice to hear, and I keep hearing that actually from a lot of people. I don't want to toot my own horn, but I think we were the first to show that you can be completely, shamelessly, unabashedly anti-politically correct and intellectually. Sorry, John.
What sort of material did you cover? Was it
pretty much everything?
Catholic?
I mean, we commented on current events, and it was pretty broad, actually.
Just from sort of a general right-wing perspective, or particular.
That's pretty much it, and that hadn't been done in Sweden, not at that professional a level.
Exactly, it kind of started out like a true conservative magazine with a really, really impressive quality, both in terms of layout and production, but most importantly in terms of the written material included. It was something entirely new, and also the fact that it was distributed during the first half of your existence, at least in pretty much all major.
Yeah, it was sold at the retailers.
Outlets.
So yeah.
Yeah, you could get it anywhere, and you also got some nice invitations to various TV debates, especially one in particular, which is still kind of famous when you are debating this liberal conservative from Timbro, this really stupid middle class liberal asshole, and you really put him in his place. I can really, for all Swedes listening,
on a personal level, he's a nice guy, I must say, though. But hey, sorry.
Yeah, okay, he might be, but he came across as a real PC asshole to me when I watched it. Especially with his really stupid arguments, which are the ones that are so typical for like middle class liberals. That multiculturalism is good because we get to eat interesting food, basically. And so forth. It was a very entertaining debate. So for all our Swedish listeners,
such a tired argument.
It is. But
the restaurant argument for immigration.
And it's so stupid because I mean we've especially when you kind of live abroad for a little while and you realize that there are actually homogeneous societies and countries that have pretty much the same diversity in like culinary sense. Without
they haven't banned pizzas in Budapest. That's what you're saying.
Exactly. I mean, if anything, I think when it comes to food, the diversity is greater in Budapest than in Sweden. the main result of our insane mass migration project is that everyone is forced to eat pizza or kebab because all the other restaurants have been driven out of business, except for the more luxurious ones, which most ordinary Swedes can't even afford. But anyways, my main point was to recommend our Swedish listeners to check out this debate with Jonas and this Timbro guy. What's his name?
Carl Rudbeck. Yeah, speaking, just to sidetrack there for just a short moment, when you speak about restaurants and that they've all been sort of driven out of business, the scariest thing, and I'm not talking about Sweden now, but when I was in Britain before I moved here some 11 or 12 years ago, I was in central Birmingham, and I asked, I don't know how many people, cab drivers and what have you, could you recommend a sort of proper English restaurant? And Birmingham is like the second biggest city in the UK. And they were at a loss. I mean, they didn't have a clue. No, you could get Italian in Birmingham still, but otherwise it was Indian, Chinese. So yeah,
you could get curry or
of course.
Well, actually, you could still. The one English thing I found you could find a lot in England is fish and chips. That's still pretty ubiquitous, but. You don't. That's not something that I personally feel the urge to eat often.
No, same here.
But
well, I believe it's vastly better than the pizza and kebab that we have in Sweden instead. Even the kind of Swedish fast food, the typical Swedish fast food, which consists of like hot dogs and mashed potatoes, basically, and has kind of been overrun by this new fast food culture driven by multiculturalism and mass migration. So yeah, pizza and kebab is pretty much the only thing you can get late at night if you're out in any major Swedish city. Not that I really care that much. I mean, that is actually kind of one of the exceptionally insignificant problems with the mass migration situation.
In comparison, yeah.
Yeah. I would be happy with a homogeneous, stable Swedish society.
You would be happy with the diet on pizza and kebab if only the rest.
Yeah.
Swedish kebab.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure there are some Swedish people intelligent enough to learn how to make kebab. So I don't think we need the migrants.
Well, in which case they're too intelligent, I think, to make it. I don't think anyone intelligent wants to eat it, but...
Anyways, let's stop talking about kebab.
Remove kebab.
Yeah, we should. Yeah. And I mean, the pizzerias, we would do well without them because they're actually causing a major health issue because it's not particularly the most healthy food you can get. So, but anyways, that was pretty much a nice backstory about you, Jonas. If you don't mind, I might tell a little bit about my own background.
No. That's I'm finished.
Great. Well, as I've said in many interviews recently, especially in Hungary, where I'm pretty much been interviewed by all major newspapers and weekly magazines and so forth. And my personal awakening happened quite early. I mean, it happened pretty much at the same time when I left childhood. I mean, which makes sense. I mean, leftist attitudes are something that is excusable when you're a child, I guess, because it's a very childish, immature ideology, and this whole refugees welcome attitude is also something that is understandable if you're like 8 years old or something. Yeah. But as soon as I reached the age of like 13, I kind of realized that my whole childhood I've been fed lies about this whole multicultural paradise and the benefits of migration and so forth. And when I started my what's it called? My seventh grade. It's called junior high, right, in English.
Junior high or middle school, depending on where you are in the US.
The British school system has been changed consistently or very frequently, I should say. So I wouldn't know what that would be, but
yeah.
It's when you enter. It's when you're 13 that you start that, right?
Exactly. In Sweden, it's called the seventh grade, and I guess junior high in the US. I'm pretty sure everyone understands approximately what I'm getting at. Anyways, I had to switch schools because my previous school, which was a very safe middle class school with pretty much exclusively Swedish kids, and they only had like up until the sixth grade. So I had to switch school, and I had to go to a neighboring school which had actually some migrants, maybe 20-25% or so. A lot of Albanians, some gypsies, and a lot of Arabs, and even a few Africans. And this is
And you're born in 78, right?
yeah, exactly.
So what you're describing now is what Sweden was like in, well, the early 90s, yeah.
Precisely, like 91 approximately. And of course it's much worse now, but this was bad enough for me because I'm kind of an analytical person, and I came there without any prejudice whatsoever. If anything, I was kind of brainwashed with this leftist attitude that we're all the same and we're all equal and so forth. So I came there with an open mind in the worst possible sense, because I was very open to these people, and it took me about 6 months to realize that these people are vastly different from Swedes. This whole migration situation is very, very, very bad for Swedish society. These people do not respect Swedish society, Swedish culture, Swedish people at all. And we have to do something about it. And that was the point when my awakening started, basically. At the age of 13, I started reading literature and magazines from organizations and authors criticizing immigration. That was my starting point. I mean, realizing all the downsides of immigration, basically. And as soon as I realized that, it was, of course, not a very big step to kind of move over into various different subjects, because I was curious about what else have they lied to me about. I mean, during my childhood, since pretty much everything I've experienced so far is totally contrary to what I was taught through the school system, through popular culture, from my parents and so forth. So that was the beginning of my awakening, and it increased and became more and more serious as I reached maturity. And by the age of 18, I started this magazine, which focused on promoting nationalist attitudes and criticizing immigration, basically. And we did it as a quite ambitious project, especially considering how young we were. It was basically me and three childhood friends who started this together, and we managed to do it in a pretty professional way. I had some older friend working for an advertisement agency who was very helpful in teaching me how to do proper magazine layout and so forth, and we made sure to get in contact with professional printers to ensure quality in the end product, and we also, actually pretty much spent all of my savings on this project to print quite big print runs of this magazine and send it out for free to all the last year graduates from Swedish high schools.
What sort of print runs did you have?
The second issue we printed 7,000 copies, and the third issue 21,000 copies. So all in all, we distributed.
Oh, that is ambitious.
Yeah, and all in all, we distributed around 25,000 copies to students in Gothenburg and Stockholm. And we did it manually. We actually gathered some friends together and we put the magazines in envelopes manually. It took like a week or so to do this, with like 4 or 5 people participating, and sent them out. And it completely ruined me. It really deprived me of all my savings. But it had some impact, some really important positive impact, of course, but also some negative impact, because it suddenly put me on the radar of the radical left. I got quite early experience from that, because first of all, I was I was kind of indicted for hate crime in Sweden. It's called incitement against an ethnic group. That's a literal translation of the Swedish law, and it's totally biased against Swedes, because it's totally legal to say anything you want about Swedes, but pretty much every other ethnicity is protected by this law. And
It's what's called Volksverhetzung in German.
And I was indicted in kind of an historical legal case, because it was one of the first ones when they kind of brushed off the dust from this old law and then tried to implement it. And they wanted to test how far they could go. And I was actually acquitted completely, even though I had a jury consisting of politicians. And the Justitiekanslern, how do you translate that into English, Jonas?
I wouldn't know, the justice, the chancellor of justice or whatever. I wouldn't know exactly what they are.
Exactly, it's a very high position within the Swedish state, within the Swedish state legal system, and he really went overboard with really trying hard to get me convicted for this, and failed completely. I was acquitted completely. But of course, this put me on the radar of the radical leftists, and it gave me the dubious honor of being included in this pretty huge media atrocity in Sweden in 98, I think it was, when all the major Swedish newspapers...
No, 99 it was.
99, yeah, that's true. 99, where all the Swedish major newspapers cooperated in something that is a significant event, actually, in European or world media history. I haven't seen anything like that before or after. But they actually took a bunch of people criticizing immigration and being fairly moderately nationalist, and put them together with various bank robbers, cop killers, some openly neo-Nazi people, and the headline was the 62 most dangerous Nazis and criminals that threaten Swedish democracy. And
they threw in the Hells Angels there as well.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny. They had, I think, 8 Hells Angels with all these sort of young, basically idealist lads, you know.
They're all led by Obergruppenführer Friedberg.
Yeah, it was quite surrealistic. I was portrayed with a kind of less flattering photo. It was from when I was 15 or something, because they were the people at Expo, who was very much a part of this. Expo is the Swedish equivalent of ADL for international listeners, and they have a huge database of thought criminals.
They're not openly Jewish in that way, but they've been aided by the ADL all along. So it's
not anymore. In the beginning, they even shared address with the Stockholm synagogue, actually, and they received a lot of funding from the Jewish community in Sweden.
Yeah, and it's run. Robert Ashberg is the chief of it, who comes from a prominent Jewish family in Sweden.
When you compare to Britain, of course, Searchlight is equivalent, although Searchlight is not as well funded and state sponsored as Expo. Expo has actually become more or less part of the Swedish state nowadays. I mean, it's totally state funded. It's totally legitimized, even though it was founded by really radical extreme leftists, one of whom was actually the primary suspect of a pretty nasty murder incident, a sadistic murder, where a young Swedish guy of the age of 16 was killed because he was wearing a Swedish flag on his jacket, and he
was killed and mutilated.
They cut off his right hand as well, or he did. Who knows if he's guilty or not? I'm not.
But it was also found the main force behind Expo was not this guy that you're talking about now, but it was Stig Larsson, who's become posthumously
international famous author.
Sainted. Yeah. He's viewed as like a saint.
Yeah, of course, because he had the right views. is not a good author in any way whatsoever. His books
No,
are
it
horrible.
sucks.
His books are
Yeah.
horrible. His only merit is that he is so politically correct. His career, his posthumous career, is basically similar to the so-called career of Henrik Arnstad, the Swedish so-called expert on fascism, which is actually a retarded person who
Clearly, yeah.
yeah, he is, and he is also a notorious liar. But still, he is been called upon as an expert from pretty much all Swedish media outlets and even the Swedish Prime Minister, which is quite amazing, and it says a lot about the horrible condition Sweden is at right now. But anyways,
When you have a system that is built on lies, it's these kind of people that profit from that. They can flourish in that kind of sick environment.
Yeah, that's perfectly true. And anyways, just to finish my story briefly, it was at that moment when they published the names and photos and the cities and age and enough personal details to identify us and to locate us for the more radical and violent leftist groups, basically. And they broadcast it on national television for the whole day. It was published in all the major newspapers and so forth. It was on that day I actually made a commitment to myself to never give up and to keep fighting these forces of evil until we have won and they are utterly destroyed. So for me, this was kind of a trial by fire or something like that. It was a very important moment in my life because it was only then I realized just how corrupt the Swedish political and media oligarchy actually was and is, and the importance of dedicating the rest of my life to destroy it, basically. So, and that is what I've been working towards ever since. And well, the rest is history. I guess everyone knows about my later projects like Multiple and Arctus, right on and so forth. So.
And for those Swedish listeners, I must say, as I've said before, that Daniel is absolutely one of the most, one of the best that we've got. There's no doubt about it.
Thank you, Jonas.
Oh, you're welcome.
So, John, over to you. Tell us a little bit about your own personal awakening and how you found, well, ITP and Arctus and everything.
Yeah, well, my story is probably going to be the least dramatic, but I don't know. I mean, I always, I grew up in New York. I was born in upstate New York, and then I grew up primarily on suburban Long Island, which it's like a land of strip malls and plastic culture and nothing particularly interesting going on. So when I grew up, I wasn't even very interested in politics for a while. I sort of had the default liberal position, I guess you could call it, sort of like you were saying, Daniel, just because in New York you're not usually exposed to much else. About the only radical alternative to American-style liberalism that I knew of was communism, because this was still the Cold War when I was growing up in the 80s. But I was never particularly attracted to that. So I don't know. I went off to University of Michigan in 1991, and it was there that I sort of became started to become anyway the person who I am now. I guess you could say, like, from when I was very young, I'd always had the sense that there was something wrong, but it didn't manifest politically at first. It was more just the sense that the modern world is kind of an unheroic place, without any kind of higher values and nothing really underlying this kind of consumer existence that most of us tend to lead in the West today. And by the time I was a teenager, I already realized that I was against that. But then when I was at university, I started to be exposed to a lot more different types of ideas, both good and bad. I mean, I got to see many of the things that are wrong with academia in the West today. I mean, this sort of implicit radical leftism that suffuses a lot of it. Although really, I have to say I did have some good instructors at Michigan. I don't want to make it sound like I I had a horrible time there. I mean, I definitely did learn a lot, but I did also, that was where I first started to become aware of this sort of leftist hegemony over American cultural and intellectual life.
It is scary, isn't it? And it's quite a wake-up call for a young person with intellectual interests.
Yeah. I sort of started to figure out after a while that, there was always discussion invited, but of course the presumption was always that, once you learned how to think about things correctly, then, you were sort of, that meant that you were, you could be accepted, into this world. I started to become aware of it, then as a student, but my initial interest was mainly in literature, and I studied literature, and my only goal at the time was to write and possibly to teach literature. Although in looking back now, I realize that a lot of the types of literature I was attracted to at the time kind of laid the foundations for the kinds of things I was going to be interested in later, because a lot of it, the stuff that I liked the most, usually questioned a lot of the assumptions about the modern world, and especially about how America is constituted. One of my favorite writers, both then and now, is Dostoevsky, and of course they didn't bother to mention to us in the classes that I took that he was actually a radical conservative. I mean, he would probably be regarded as a fascist were he alive in today's world.
No, it's probably something worse. So
yes.
But we have that in common, by the way, John.
I
probably my favorite author as well, and the one that has sort of meant the most to me, I would say. Him and Bernard Noss.
Yeah, he's just fantastic. But two of the others who were very important to me at that age were Nietzsche and Wagner. They were probably the most important influences on me when I was in my early 20s.
Wagner as an author or as a composer?
Richard Wagner, the composer.
Mm. And but he also wrote essays and stuff.
Yes, and I started to also read those at that time, so that also had an influence on me, and more broadly, sort of the German and European intellectual tradition I was exposed to, and I would say I was actually kind of a Nietzsche. I've come to appreciate other aspects of his thought more, and not so much this one, but it kind of led me into a very juvenile kind of atheist period of my life. I now actually think that that's one of the less appealing aspects of Nietzsche's work, but that's one of the things that I was attracted to at that age. But anyway, being interested in that type of thing, and also University of Michigan had an extremely good library. I started to read up on things, and I discovered the German conservative revolutionary figures like Ernst Jünger and Spengler and the others, and before long, I came across some references to the New Right and so forth. But the problem was that, at that time, this was the early 90s, it was before the internet. So I knew absolutely nobody else who was interested in this sort of material. So I thought that its relevance for politics today was pretty close to nothing. So I kind of lost interest for it for a few years. But then by the late 90s, with the development of the internet, I sort of got back into these ideas, the conservative revolution and the New Right. And I was beginning to discover traditionalism as well once I moved out of my kind of juvenile atheist phase. And then I realized that there were a lot of people online who were talking about these things, and we're looking at things kind of the same way I was. So that's how I sort of first began to get drawn into the milieu, that we're all part of now. The problem was that at that time there was no real organization in the U.S. Of any worth. Well, it's questionable whether there is today, but at least there's some good websites and so forth. But
it has developed, though. I mean, it is better.
Yeah,
today
absolutely.
Than it was then. So yeah.
Absolutely. Although I never at any point was attracted to the Republicans, or American conservatism. I mean, it wasn't until later that I found out about paleoconservatism and so forth, which I wouldn't describe myself that way, but I've come to realize that it's a good school of thought, even though I don't think there's much chance it's gonna become the dominant ideology in the U.S. again. But anyway, so I got drawn into these things, and then once I finished it at Michigan, I ended up working there for an additional 11 years, just in an office. I was like a low-level administrator at the university, and I quickly realized that this kind of lifestyle of just having to drag yourself to work every day, and each day being pretty much like every other day, really wasn't for me. But I didn't really know how to get out of it for a while, so I ended up doing it for many years. But I was growing more and more unhappy with it the entire time, and I also started to feel like more of an urge, like I wanted to get involved politically, and I wanted to realize myself more spiritually, and find some meaning in my life. So I continued pursuing these interests intellectually, but I didn't really know in what direction to take it in. And also, being at the university like I was, I really, University of Michigan is, as I imagine most American listeners to this know, is a very leftist institution, and I really got sick of the rhetoric and the hypocrisy that I was exposed to there. So it was about 2006 that I made contact with a couple of friends of mine from Europe, and at the end of that year, we ended up launching Integral Tradition Publishing, which was the predecessor to Arctos. And its goal was largely the same as Arctos. I mean, we realized how little literature there was on the New Right and the conservative revolution and certain aspects of traditionalism. So we wanted to rectify that, and also, of course, to hopefully produce original works. It was very ambitious, but the problem was we really lacked resources, both in terms of time and money. So we kind of limped along for 2 years, and we got a few books out, like Avel's Metaphysics of War. That was actually the first book we ever published, and we still keep that in print at Arctos. But it was at the end of 2008 when my colleagues and I hit on the idea that we couldn't pay ourselves salaries that would be enough for us to live on in the US or Europe. Western Europe anyway, but we recognized that one of our friends had actually moved to India the previous year, and he kept telling us about how incredibly cheap it was. So for me, it offered an opportunity to kind of fulfill two things I wanted to do. One was to do ITP full time, because I could actually live on what little bit we were making at that time, and only do that. And the other thing was, I was very interested in exploring more about Hinduism and traditional spirituality more generally, and I had the opportunity to stay at a Hindu ashram the first couple of years I was in India. So at the beginning of 2009, I went to India, and I was there for a year, and then it was at the end of that year that we learned that Daniel and some of his partners at the time were thinking of a project along similar lines. And we thought, well, rather than trying to compete with each other, why don't we combine resources and create something even bigger and better? So that was at the end of 2009. That's when we created Arctos. And then Daniel joined the company along with some of our other Swedish colleagues, and he himself ended up coming to India in 2011, and that enabled us to really start picking up the pace once we were all doing it full time. And I think most people already know what happened since then. Arctos has been going for 6 years now, and we've gotten out, I guess, about 130 books to date, and I'm really pleased. I always say with Arctos, if I could go back in time 20 or 25 years and say, what would I like to be doing with my life, this is pretty much it. And the guidelines I use when I'm evaluating whether a book is something that we should print in Arctos is this something that I would have wanted to have had access to when I was 20 years old or whatever, first getting interested in these ideas. So I'm really happy with the way things have gone, both in terms of my life and in terms of the work we've been able to do.
So thank you for that very inspiring and exciting story, John. And now it's time to go to music break, and we're going to listen to Sonnne Hagal, Ragnaroek. Enjoy.
First the sun, then the moon, all the stars from the sky. They will burn, they will fall, unknown for all times. Then the air, and the trees, and the mountains and the hills. They will drown, they will fall, unknown for all times. Only golden and red echoes remain. Love has turned hate and pride into disdain.
From the music break, and during this final part of the podcast, we want to talk about some current events. So to start with, we recently kind of finished a recent Kickstarter campaign. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that, John.
Well, we've had two recently. There was the first one that we had was for this Grimberg project, which is, as I've been told by you, Daniel, it's a 10-volume history of Sweden, right?
Actually, it's 11 volumes, but yeah.
11 volumes, and it's been out of print for about 100 years now. And
no, it's been out of print for like 60, 70 years, perhaps.
Okay, and it was written before the reign of political correctness in Sweden, so it actually contains actual information on the history of Sweden and not propaganda. So we're having it updated, and we've already begun work on reissuing that. So that Kickstarter was a great success, and we just last week finished one for the three recent works of Guillaume Faye, He's published 4 books the last few years. One of them we've already published. That's Sex and Deviance. We published that at the end of 2014. And this latest Kickstarter project was for Archaeofuturism 2.0, which is a sequel to what many consider to be his most important work, Archaeofuturism, where he outlines his vision for the future of Europe as being a synthesis of traditionalism and high technology. Archaeofuturism 2.0 is a fictional book. It's a book of short stories based on the ideas that he described in Archaeofuturism. The other book is called Understanding Islam, and that one is Fai's take on Islam, especially Islam in Europe, and about its basic incompatibility with European civilization, and why it inevitably leads to conflict with European civilization. And the third book is called Controversy in Society, and that's a collection of essays on various topics by Fai. The Kickstarter, which we set it at £8,000, was a great success. We've already gotten a translator started on Understanding Islam, and we're about to start the other translator on Archaeofuturism 2.0, and we will also, actually Fai hasn't even finished writing Controversy in Society yet, but he's promised us the manuscript by next month, so then we'll get that one underway. And we also have more upcoming Kickstarter campaigns. The next one we want to do will be for the translation of Alain de Benoit's View from the Right, which he originally published in 1977, and it's widely considered to be his most important work out of many important works. I know it's a series of essays on various topics where he attempted to distill what he saw as the genuine right-wing philosophy. It's a massive book. I think in French it's like 700 or 800 pages. But he won a prize from the French Academy for it at the time. So it's a work that's even respected outside of right-wing circles. It's really something that's been needed for a long time. For me, I have to say, when we started Arctos, it's one of the things that I wanted Arctos to do. So it will be a real dream can come true for me. So we'll be announcing that Kickstarter campaign in the next week or so. And I think after that, Daniel and I are still discussing it, but we've thought about doing one for some upcoming Avila projects we want to do. So yeah, it's really been a good idea for us to start doing this, because what we used to do over the past 5 years was we would have projects in mind, but we would have to wait until we got enough profits from the sales of our books to build up that we can engage translators and so forth in these projects. Doing the Kickstarters enables us to get the money right away and just get the things going. So I think that's really this is something that's working out quite well for us, and I think our readers will be pleased to see us be getting the stuff out even faster than before.
Absolutely, and it's actually a win-win. I mean, both for Arctos and for our readers, because we will be able to publish books at 4 or 5 times the pace that we originally have done historically, and so forth. It's really a good concept. I mean, getting this kind of crowdfunding where supporters can actually help out, getting important works out quicker, and I'm sure they will appreciate the results when they see all these 3 Guillaume Fai titles, for example, coming out during this year, and also for all our Swedish supporters, which are quite a lot. I'm pretty sure that they will appreciate Grimberg as well, of which we are actually almost done with the first volume, and the second volume is like halfway done. So the first volume will be published next month. We'll post an update to our Kickstarter page about that. And I hope that as many as possible of you who listen will support our next Kickstarter campaign for View from the Right, since that is probably one of the most significant significant books that we are planning to publish in the future.
Well, as far as our Swedish listeners go, maybe we should mention too that, would you say by next month, Daniel, we should be able to have the Roger Scruton's How to Be a Conservative in Swedish?
Yeah, I certainly hope so. By the end of next month, the translation is done. It's currently undergoing some proofreading, but yeah, next month, end of next month is certainly a realistic prognosis. Apart from that, I mean, recently, speaking of recent events, I was just a week ago or so, I was contacted by a Swedish tabloid, maybe the most infamous of the Swedish tabloids, and certainly the biggest. It's called Aftonbladet, who wanted to do an interview with me. They wanted to come here to Budapest and do a personal interview where they wouldn't censor me in any way or twist my words.
I know this because I've talked to you, but just to clarify for our listeners, that they're an extremely left-wing, but also a very large newspaper in Sweden, right?
Yeah, it's a tabloid. It's a less serious newspaper, but it's a daily newspaper. Absolutely, pretty much all Swedish newspapers are quite left-wing. Maybe with the
at the same time, it's a very sort of commercial in its approach. So when you say extremely left-wing, yeah, to some extent, and you have sort of extremely or extreme left-wing persons working with it. But at the same time, this general tone of it is just sort of really, yeah.
They obviously are trying to appeal to the lowest common denominator in the readers, and the quality of the journalism is really bad. It's really lowbrow.
At the same time, it's the oldest daily newspaper in Sweden.
Yeah, absolutely. Nevertheless,
I mean, it's not always been. It used to be a conservative newspaper.
Yeah, many of the newspapers used to be conservative. Even the ones, even the single one that still kind of tries to pretend to be conservative used to be a real conservative newspaper. Of course, I'm talking about Svenska Dagbladet. They're basically culturally Marxist, all of them, and it says a lot about the Swedish media landscape, really, because it's in a horrible state. We don't have any.
It's a fucking joke.
Yeah,
it's my language. Yeah.
It is. I totally agree. It's a total joke, and the funny thing is that they were really eager to get an interview with me, and they were kind of contacting me continuously for the past couple of weeks. And a week ago, I got like a final request. So, are we going to do this or what? And I responded politely and said that sure, we can do this interview. I would be more than happy to participate in an interview in Aftonbladet, just on one condition, that you will participate in an interview for us, because we are currently doing a pretty huge report on the state of Swedish journalism in general, and how Swedish media managed to push this mass immigration agenda on the Swedish people with various propaganda tools. And we're very eager to interview you, as well as many others, to get your personal perspective, as well as your view on your own personal responsibility in this ethnical transformation that has taken place during the last few decades. And we already have a syndication agreement in place, which will make this piece available in lots of countries all over Eastern and Central Europe. And I hope that you like this concept and that you're happy to participate. And yeah, as you can imagine, the response I got was like, this is more like a publicist issue, so you should talk to our publicist about this. So they suddenly forgot all about the interview with me, which I'm not that sad about, actually. I would be happy to do it if they would be brave enough to participate in an interview for us, but apparently not.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
And we will still continue to with this project, obviously, but and I've already thrown out some hooks to try to get some other Swedish journalists on board, because I think the rest of the world is very curious to know about the motivations and the kind of twisted way of thinking within the Swedish journalist core when it comes to multiculturalism and cultural Marxism, and why they think it's so important that Sweden takes in like 2%, well, increases our population with 2% every year with non-Europeans. I'm actually truly curious myself.
I think it's more, actually, to be honest. I don't think we can trust that statistics.
No, it's probably 3 or 4, but anyways, it's still a really significant number, and I'm very happy to hear the personal take from these people who have helped facilitate this extremely damaging, horrible experiment by their part in the propaganda apparatus of the state. I mean, the Swedish media, obviously. I hope that we can find a few people who dare to participate in interviews with us, and I'm sure it will be quite interesting. So we will keep you posted on the progress on that. Exactly. I'm honestly curious how it's possible to think in these cultural Marxist crazy ways in the current year. I mean, it's 2016. Come on.
Yeah, that stuff was like 60 years old.
Yeah, and I'm sure we can find a few victims who we can include in this report, and we'll try to reach the most significant ones. I'm sure they will hang up on us, but at least it will provide some good entertainment value. And I'm also quite confident that we will be able to publish this in various mainstream medias all over Eastern and Central Europe, and maybe even in the Anglophone world, because many people are curious about the Swedish experiment and the craziness going on.
Yeah, definitely.
So yeah, we will definitely follow through on that particular project. And when it comes to Write-On, I mean, this is obviously a Write-On project because Write-On is our English website and kind of our gateway to the rest of the world. We also have another interesting project upcoming. We're going to start a forum in a short while, which many of our supporters have been asking for some time now, and I guess it will be launched in maybe a week or two. So stay tuned for that as well. Anyways, John or Jonas, do you have anything?
Well, Daniel, maybe listeners might want to hear a little bit about what you've been up to in Hungary lately. You've been kind of on a speaking tour.
Yeah,
Months.
That's actually true. First of all,
we should actually probably tell the listeners that Daniel's book, The Real Right Returns, and the many different languages it's been translated into, has been Arctos's best-selling book ever to date. So it's been garnering a lot of attention, especially here in Hungary. But
the Hungarian edition has actually been the most successful edition to date. I mean, we sold 1,500 copies in the first week after we printed it, which is kind of a new record for Arctos. And I've been interviewed by 4 major news outlets so far. I've been covered in even more. I mean, most conservative or right-wing news outlets have been writing about me, and I recently gave a lecture to the biggest conservative student union here in Hungary about the importance of metapolitics and return of the real right and so forth, and it was very much appreciated. We had a lot of journalists attending and reporting about the event afterwards in a quite favorable way, and we also had I also attended a book signing event for one of the biggest book retailer chains in Hungary at the book festival a couple of weeks ago, where I signed books for a lot of people. It was actually a bit overwhelming. I was actually a bit moved by the interest from the Hungarian people in this book. People actually lined up literally to get the book signed, including a lot of important people from the establishment and a lot of people from the the business world as well. And next week I'm going to give another talk. It will be more like a book presentation for the big annual book festival in Budapest. And it's actually next Thursday. So it will be interesting, and I'm sure it will garner a lot of attention, both from the media and from our supporters in general, and it will definitely help the sales of the Hungarian edition. So,
well, I think people should realize, there's a real hunger for new right-wing ideas in Hungary, because, we could say that Hungary is a very conservative country, but it sort of is not in an ideological sense, but just the people's sensibilities are that way. And when I've talked to Hungarians about this, they'll say, there are books, of right-wing thought in Hungarian, but most of them are quite old, or or the ones today are focused mainly on historical issues. So we found out that there was quite a need for these types of books here in Hungary. And since we're living here now, we decided it was time to start to tap into that market. And now we've got contacts here and so forth, and it's nice to be able to make a difference in the place where we're actually living, and which is setting an example for the rest of the Western world in terms of how it's been dealing with immigration this past year. So I'm pretty proud of that fact, as I'm sure you are, Daniel, since you wrote it.
Definitely. As you said, Hungary is a wonderful country, especially culturally and also politically, of course. And I think they are already quite familiar with the new rights, since many of our authors already write regularly for a couple of the weekly or daily magazines and newspapers here in Hungary. But still, I think we have something new to offer that can provide them with even more efficient tools in this struggle of ours against cultural Marxism and the destruction of European civilization. So I'm very proud as well to be part of that. And also the book is within the next month or so. It's coming out in Portuguese and Spanish editions as well. So I will be giving some sort of speaking tour throughout the Iberian Peninsula and also in Brazil, as it seems. So lots of things happening.
That's going to be a long wait.
But it will be interesting, since I've actually never been to South America. But I want to thank everyone for listening, and tune in again to our next podcast next week. Thank you for listening. Bye.
Bye-bye.